So, if I was to ask you, what is the most hated consumable in the game? I'll probably get a range of answers. I mean, most of the consumables in the game, they're fine. I mean, if I asked this back in the Operation Ice event, I'll probably say the pumpkin bomb because the fact that I only had a 20% chance of giving, removing the no target and the god immunity from the frost spawner was a pain in the arse. In fact, I think it has to be less than 20%. I was barely getting any frost spawners that actually got no target and god removed, basically. Then we might get the multi-monster because it's just so rare. The nuke because it's only one-time use and there's a slight delay, which I didn't realise when I first used the nuke. Then you got the barricade, which actually doesn't deal 150 health. It only does that if an enemy has less than 150 health, otherwise it deals no damage to them because it's not meant to be a thing that's meant to damage enemies. It's meant to only clear up the enemies with lower health. But I think the most hated consumable in the game is actually the Molotov. How do I have 61 of these? I barely opened any consumable crates because look, I have only 6 UAVs and then 16 airstrikes. I think I got a load of Molotovs because of wins from Triumph wins. Yeah, surprisingly they're quite common alongside the grenade. I've got more grenades though than Molotovs, a lot more, like by a factor of 100. I have never used any of these consumables, by the way, nor the flashbang. Now, firstly, the grenade and the Molotovs are both common consumables. However, if you ask people if they prefer to use the grenade or the Molotov, most of the time, people would prefer to say they use the Molotov. The reason for this is because even though the grenade does 125 damage compared to the Molotov's 96, the fact is, when you use the Molotov, it stays in the area, generally, where you throw it, for a long period of time, whereas the grenade is a one-time use thing. It only explodes once, and yeah. Therefore, if you have, say, a load of abnormals, right, the best idea, actually, even though that's a poor grenade, but the grenade, it's a one-time thing, yes, but if the spawn delay was longer by any reason. So here, for example, even though I think there are about 500-ish abnormals here, the grenade, even though it explodes, it doesn't have that much of a large explosion radius and can't clear up all of those abnormals that easily. However, if you were to do the same for the Molotov and you throw it accurately, you can see that all of these enemies, they get cleared up. That's about 600 abnormals easily cleared. Now, the grenade does have one more use than the Molotov, but overwhelmingly, people would prefer to use the Molotov compared to the grenade just because its area of effect, the fact that it stays on the path for much longer than the grenade, because the grenade just explodes, most people would prefer to use the Molotov. However, there is a very, I wouldn't say weird mechanic, it's part of the design of these types of consumables where, because they kind of bounce, there's been a lot of things with the Molotov that people hate. In fact, there's only just one thing that people hate. The bounce of the Molotov. Now, the thing is, these throwable consumables, it's not like none of them can bounce. All of them can bounce. For example, you can see the grenade there. That can bounce. It can bounce right off the path. I'm aiming at the path, and it's bouncing off into the side of the path, basically. However, it doesn't really affect the grenade too much, this bounce, because of the fact that its explosion radius means that even if you poorly place the grenade, like, I don't know, slightly off the path, it still can affect the path there because of its explosion range. However, for the Molotov, yeah, that's a slight bit of an issue, because if you try and throw the Molotov right onto the path, it might not actually go to the path. So actually there, even though I slightly aimed off the path, it actually aims on the path, and as you can see here, I'm actually getting a load of hits on the path. This is because I actually have tested the Molotov and I know like what's the best way to use it. But if I was to go up here, right, and throw the Molotov, say, all the way over there, you can see it actually bounced a lot further than where I intended it to hit. So if I was to put it in this corner right there, it slightly moves forward, and if I go all the way back here and try and do that, try and do it there, yeah, it goes all the way off into the path. Now, the issue with this is, it's the Molotov's bounce. The thing is, the Molotov's bounce is based on the trajectory on where you throw the Molotov. So, as you can see there, I've aimed it about here, and it goes all the way over here. See, that's the one thing with the Molotov, right? You need to have a good trajectory of it, otherwise it will bounce horribly. You don't want to get too close either, because if you bounce it like there, it sometimes bounces off the path. That is slightly off the path. It looks like some of the range circle is inside the path, but if I was to spawn in some enemies, it actually might not be inside the path. In fact, they might not reach it in time. So if I were to do it, say, here, for example, and then throw the Molotov there, yeah, it went off the path. Even though I aimed onto the path, it bounced right off the path. So that's the issue with the Molotov. You got to get good with the throwing of the Molotovs. So try and aim it here. That time it actually did go on the path. So if you're doing it like me, there's a slight chance that it might go off the path. However, I feel like there needs to be a tutorial guide on how to actually use the Molotov. Right, so the Molotov, because of its bounce, because of its projectile speed, is actually based on actually slightly further than where you place the mouse. So as you can see, I'm placing it dead center on the path. However, it bounces forward slightly, but the path actually managed to capture it. So it still remains on the path mostly. But if I were to do it here, Still same difference. If I was to do it here, that is still on the path slightly. So if I was to aim it, say, here, for example, yeah, that is definitively off the path. Even though the placement of the circle here was there, so it's still on the path, it is slightly off the path. And that is slightly off the path as well. So if I were to get some, abnormals and try and use a Molotov on those, yeah, as you can see, it's off the path, and these abnormals, they won't get affected. Even though you could argue that the explosion radius is in range of them, they're not being affected. So what I need to aim slightly forward, and even if I do aim slightly forward, that looks like the center of the path, right? Are the abnormals being affected? Yeah, barely, by that last throw. The other throw, that wasn't on the path. So using the Molotov is a dark art. So you've got to base it on where the trajectory is. Now, here's a secret for you. It always bounces forward. Well, bounces forward as in where you're throwing it. So here, it always bounces forwards. The thing with the Molotov is that it depends on the type of path that you're throwing it at. Because if you throw it, say, I don't know, here, for example, it might accidentally hit. There's a slight edge to the path here, and because this Molotov is a projectile, it actually can detect those type of things. If you hit it incorrectly and you place it like there, for example, I am purposely trying to aim it for there, it might bounce and deflect away from the path. Yeah, like that. If it so happens to aim incorrectly and bounces off the path like that, you're kind of screwed. Now, the thing for the Molotov is the best way to use it is to basically be very close to where you're trying to aim it for, so its bounce doesn't go all too whack. As you can see here, I'm getting pretty consistent hits on the path, even though it is still bouncing, and sometimes it does bounce slightly off to the side, but I'm getting pretty consistent hits. Now, the best way to use the Molotov is to try and aim for straight, because with that, it barely bounces. If it does bounce, it bounces normally forwards, and because it's a straight, it will bounce always going forwards. And the thing with the Molotov is you don't want to get too close, because as you can see from my previous experiments, it sometimes bounces off to the path if you're too close. And if you're from here, for example, it bounces fairly well. It bounces into the path most of the time. Sometimes it bounces off. However, this is a corner. With using the Molotov, you don't want to be aiming for corners, because like I said, the path has a mesh, and the mesh is like really weird. And as you saw, while bouncing off the edge of like this path here, it bounced off into the side of the path. A straight like this is the only way to basically guarantee that it always hits the path. So if I was to do it in, say, toy board here, yeah, so if you aim it straight onto the path, you can see that it works. But if you aim for, like, say, the corners, I mean, it works here because the corners are actually quite large here. But if I had a smaller area to aim for here, as you can see, I aimed for the middle of this path and it actually got off the path. So you want to aim straight down it rather than perpendicular to it. In mathematics, it's very simple. You want to aim parallel to the path. You don't want to aim perpendicular to the path. Otherwise, the bounce might actually take it off the path. In fact, as you can see here, it's actually hovering over the path. It still affects it because I think the ring is actually vertical for a bit. But don't aim perpendicular. Don't aim like this because your results may not actually hit it onto the path. Aim it like this, parallel. And you don't want to be too far away, so far that the bounce actually causes it to go away from the path. Also, because it's affected by objects, you want to make sure that you don't want to aim for, like, I don't know, this pack of cards here. Yeah, that's the one side effect with throwable consumables. It's affected by collidable objects. Now, the problem is, you're using the Molotov likely in a high area situation where things are going wrong. You're under stress, you know, you're using it, and then all of a sudden, oh wait, it bounces off to the path like that. Now, the problem is, I'm not actually perpendicular to the path. My character isn't facing towards the path, therefore, the Molotov actually acts in a weird way. If you were to aim straight for the path, it actually kind of works better. So this is as much as your character placement as it is the projectile of the Molotov. If you don't aim perpendicular to it, it goes into bouncing in a weird way. Now, I know for tablet users, this might actually be an issue because you have to position your character, then throw the Molotov, which actually takes time. And under high pressure situations, that might not be viable. Therefore, and these methods don't actually guarantee that it actually hits where you intended it to hit. Having like a medium distance, having nearly a run-up basically, sometimes the run-up doesn't really work. So actually, I don't know if you want to use a run-up or not, but perpendicular, no, parallel to the path, a medium distance away, not right on top of it, so the bounce goes weirdly, and not so far away that it bounces straight in front of it. If there wasn't a box here, it would just go straight towards the front of the path. And if that frustrates you, if using the Molotov frustrates you, and Shane, I'm looking at you, just use the bloody grenade. Like, the bounce is still existent. It seems as less dull compared to the Molotov, because the Molotov, right, it's bottle shaped. And as you can see here, even though I'm throwing it, it's bouncing off to the side away from the path. Whereas for the grenade, it bounces, but it still bounces into the path, basically. So, the bounce on the grenade is actually less compared to the Molotov. I think it's based on the fact that the Molotov is a bottle, so it actually flips over away from the path. As you can see there, it flips over away from the path, whereas a grenade, yeah, it's a ball, you would expect it to actually roll, but I think the handle of the grenade actually means that it doesn't roll as much as you think it would. So basically, using the Molotov is kind of a skill issue. If you are using the Molotov and it doesn't hit where you intended it to hit, that's a skill issue, apparently. And in that case, just swap over to the grenade. Come on. It's if you're using consumables early on because you don't want to place down any towers, just expect that the Molotov is going to be slightly unreliable. It can be relied upon like 80, 70% of the time, but just be aware of its bounce.